There are moments in history when a place, quiet, remote, seemingly forgotten, suddenly becomes the center of the world's attention. In August of 2019, and again just weeks into January 2026, the President of the United States made an unusual suggestion that America should purchase Greenland from Denmark. The first time, the world laughed. Diplomats expressed shock. Editorial pages called it absurd. But the second time, the laughter was quieter. Because something had changed. Tonight, I'd like to take you beneath the ice of this extraordinary island to understand not just what lies hidden there, but why the world's most powerful nations are suddenly so interested in a land that has remained frozen and largely untouched for millennia. This is a story about ancient culture, modern civilization, and a trillion-dollar secret that may reshape the global balance of power in ways we're only beginning to understand. Now, let's begin where all stories about Greenland must begin, with the people who have called this frozen land home for 4,000 years. If you appreciate thoughtful explorations of history, geography, and the quiet forces shaping our world, you're welcome to subscribe. Now, let's begin where all stories about Greenland must begin. With the people who have called this frozen land home for 4,000 years. To understand what's happening in Greenland today, we need to go back, far back, to understand who built their lives in what seems like one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. According to archaeological records, the first peoples arrived in Greenland around 2500 BCE. They came from what is now Canada, traveling across the frozen channels of the Arctic in pursuit of seals, whales, and caribou. These weren't desperate refugees. These were master hunters, people who had developed technologies, the targeling harpoon, the kayak, the sod house, that allowed them to thrive where others would perish. The Norse called them Skraelings. History knows them as the Dorset people, and later, the Thule, ancestors of today's Greenlandic Inuit. In 982 CE, a red-haired Norse explorer named Eric the Red arrived from Iceland. He had been exiled for manslaughter, a detail the saga's matter-of-factly record. And he needed a new home. What he found was a land of green valleys along the southwestern fjords. He named it Greenland, whether as accurate description or clever marketing, historians still debate. For nearly 500 years, Norse settlers raised cattle, built churches, and traded walrus ivory back to Europe. At their peak, they numbered perhaps 5,000 souls. And then, quietly, they vanished. By the 1400s, the Norse settlements were abandoned. Ships sent from Norway found empty halls, scattered belongings, and silence. Several theories exist. Climate change, the medieval warm period ending. Economic collapse, when elephant ivory from Africa replaced walrus tusks. Conflict with the Thule people, whose technology was better suited to the changing conditions. But this raises an important question: why did the Inuit survive when the Norse could not? The answer tells us something profound about adaptation. The Norse tried to recreate European farming in the Arctic. The Inuit had spent millennia perfecting Arctic living. One culture imposed. The other belonged. Today, Greenland's population of 56,000 is roughly 90% Greenlandic Inuit. They speak Greenlandic, Kalaallisut, an Inuit language that sounds nothing like Danish, despite 3 centuries of colonial rule. Their capital, Nuuk, sits where Norse ruins crumble into the sea. In homes there, you'll find both sealskin car-meat boots and Wi-Fi routers. Traditional drum dancing and Netflix. This is not a culture frozen in time. This is a living civilization navigating the tension between ancient wisdom and modern sovereignty. Which brings us to the colonial question, and the nation that still, technically, owns Greenland. Denmark's relationship with Greenland is complicated. And that complication matters enormously to what's happening now. The Danish-Norwegian claim. In 1721, a Norwegian-Danish missionary named Hans Egede established a colony in Greenland. His goal was converting the Norse settlers he believed still lived there, descendants of Eric the Red. He found no Norse. Only Inuit, who had their own spiritual traditions, their own ways of understanding the world. Nevertheless, Denmark-Norway claimed sovereignty. For the next 2 centuries, Greenland existed as a colonial possession, economically marginal, largely ignored except for whaling and trading posts. The Second World War changed everything. When Germany occupied Denmark in 1940, Greenland suddenly found itself cut off. The Danish governor in Greenland, Esbjørn, made a remarkable decision. He declared Greenland temporarily self-governing and negotiated directly with the United States. America, recognizing Greenland's strategic position, sitting between North America and Europe, established air bases there. The most important, Thule Air Base, in the remote northwest. These weren't temporary installations. They are still there. After the war, Denmark reasserted control, but something had shifted. Greenlanders had tasted autonomy. They'd seen their island become strategically vital. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, a Greenlandic political consciousness grew. Not violent revolution, but persistent, dignified assertion: we are not Danish. We are Greenlandic. In 1979, Denmark granted home rule. In 2009, this expanded to self-rule. Greenland controls everything except foreign affairs and defense, which Denmark still manages. But here's the crucial detail: the 2009 Self-Rule Act includes a provision. Greenland can declare full independence whenever it chooses, if approved by referendum. There's one significant obstacle. Denmark provides an annual block grant to Greenland of approximately 3.9 billion Danish kroner, about $570 million. This represents roughly 1/3 of Greenland's government budget. For a population of 56,000, this dependency is substantial. Independence would require Greenland to replace that revenue. Which brings us, at last, to what lies beneath the ice. What the documents and geological surveys reveal is not dramatic, but it is profound. Greenland may hold some of the largest untapped mineral wealth on the planet. Greenland's bedrock is among the oldest on Earth, parts of it nearly 4 billion years old, formed when our planet was still cooling. This ancient geology, combined with tectonic activity over eons, created ideal conditions for mineral concentration. But until recently, most of it remained locked under ice sheets up to 3 kilometers thick. Climate change, whatever one's views on its causes, is revealing what was hidden. In 2013, a detailed survey identified significant deposits of rare earth elements in Greenland's south. These elements, neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, have names most people never encounter. But we use them every day. They're essential for smartphone screens, electric vehicle batteries, wind turbine magnets, military guidance systems, medical imaging equipment. Currently, China controls approximately 70% of global rare earth production. This creates what strategists call supply chain vulnerability, a gentle term for a potentially catastrophic dependency. Greenland's deposits could change this equation entirely. Then there's petroleum. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that the waters off Greenland's western coast may contain 17.5 billion barrels of undiscovered oil and 148 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. For context, that oil figure represents roughly 3 years of current global consumption. These aren't proven reserves, they are estimates based on geological modeling. But several major oil companies have already spent hundreds of millions on exploratory licenses. Greenland also contains significant uranium deposits. One of the world's largest at Veinfield in the south. There's zinc, lead, gold, rubies of exceptional quality, iron ore deposits that could supply global steelmaking for decades. The Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland published a comprehensive assessment in 2019. Their conclusion, stated with scientific understatement, was that Greenland possesses the world-class mineral potential across multiple commodities. Here we encounter a profound irony. Climate change, caused in large part by extracting and burning fossil fuels, is making Greenland's minerals accessible. Mining those minerals will likely accelerate the very changes revealing them. This isn't a political observation. It's a simple statement of physical causality that anyone studying the situation must confront. Conservative estimates suggest Greenland's total mineral wealth could exceed $1 trillion. Some projections run considerably higher. For a nation of 56,000 people, this represents approximately $18 million per person, though of course, wealth distribution never works so simply. But it explains why Greenland could theoretically achieve economic independence from Denmark. And why other nations are paying very close attention. So far, we've explored Greenland's ancient culture, its colonial history, and the extraordinary mineral wealth beneath its ice. Now we need to examine why this matters geopolitically. Why powerful nations are positioning themselves around an island most people couldn't locate on a map. This is where President Trump's proposals, made 8 years apart, begin to make strategic sense, even if the diplomatic approach raised eyebrows. What we're witnessing isn't merely about minerals or money. It's about the fundamental reshaping of Arctic geopolitics in an age when shipping routes, military positioning, and resource security are being recalculated for a warming world. Let's examine who wants what and why. Great powers don't announce their Arctic strategies in press conferences. They reveal them through infrastructure investments, military exercises, and diplomatic positioning. If you know what to look for, the pattern becomes clear. The United States has maintained Thule Air Base since 1943. Officially, it's part of the Space Force's early warning system, massive radar arrays watching for missile launches over the pole. But in 2020, the US opened a consulate in Nuuk, Greenland's first foreign consulate. A seemingly small gesture that sent a clear message: we're here, we're engaged, we're not leaving. When President Trump first proposed purchasing Greenland in August 2018, the Danish Prime Minister called the idea absurd. Trump cancelled a state visit to Denmark in response. The international press treated it as diplomatic theatre, an embarrassing episode that would be quickly forgotten. But then, in January 2026, the proposal resurfaced. This time, the reaction was different. More measured. More analytical. What changed? China published its first Arctic policy white paper in 2018, the same year as Trump's first Greenland proposal. Coincidence? Perhaps. The document outlined China's vision of a polar Silk Road, Arctic shipping routes that could reduce transit time from Asia to Europe by roughly 2 weeks compared to southern routes through the Suez Canal. China attempted to purchase an abandoned naval base in Greenland for development into a commercial airport. Denmark quietly blocked the sale, then funded the airport development itself with Danish money. China has invested in mineral exploration licenses. Chinese state-owned mining companies have shown persistent interest in Greenland's rare earth deposits. This isn't aggressive expansion. It's patient, strategic positioning, the approach China has perfected globally. Russia has been more direct. Over the past 15 years, Russia has reopened dozens of Soviet-era Arctic military bases. They've deployed advanced missile systems along the Arctic coast. They've conducted the largest Arctic military exercises since the Cold War. Russia's northern coastline is extensive, half the Arctic Ocean's perimeter. A warmer Arctic benefits Russia economically through shipping and resource access. But it also requires Russia to defend what it considers its northern approaches, especially as NATO countries increase their own Arctic presence. Here's what keeps strategic planners awake at night. The Northwest Passage, through Canada's Arctic archipelago, has historically been frozen solid, impassable most of the year. It remained a dream that consumed Arctic explorers for centuries. In recent summers, it's been ice-free. This route connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans without passing through the Panama Canal. For global shipping, it's transformative. Canada claims these waters as internal, Canadian territory. The US considers them international straits, open to all vessels. This legal ambiguity becomes critical when you consider Chinese commercial vessels, or Russian naval ships, transiting what Canada considers its sovereign waters. Greenland sits at the eastern entrance to this passage. Controlling Greenland means controlling access. Denmark is a NATO member. Through Denmark's control of Greenland, NATO has a presence in the Arctic. But if Greenland became independent, as it legally can, would it join NATO? Remain neutral? Align elsewhere? These aren't theoretical questions. Greenland's parliament has debated them seriously. European strategic documents now explicitly reference high North security, diplomatic language for Arctic military concerns. Norway has increased its Arctic deployments. The UK has announced Arctic training exercises. The Arctic is no longer a frozen frontier. It's becoming a contested space. It's worth pausing here because in all this strategic maneuvering, there are actual Greenlanders, people whose families have lived on this ice for 4,000 years, watching foreign powers discuss their homeland's future. Greenland's Prime Minister, Muttejeed, has stated clearly, "We are not for sale. We are not Danish. We are Greenlandic." But Greenlandic politicians aren't naive. They understand their strategic value. Some see it as leverage, a way to negotiate better terms with Denmark, or to attract investment that might make independence economically viable. Others worry that courting great power interest invites great power interference, that Greenland might exchange Danish colonialism for Chinese debt or American military dominance. These debates happen in Greenlandic, Inuit's parliament, reported sparsely in international press that tends to focus on what Washington or Beijing wants, rather than what Greenlanders choose. Which brings us to the question at the heart of this entire story. What does sovereignty mean for a nation of 56,000 people sitting on $1 trillion in minerals that powerful countries desperately need? Greenland's path to independence is legally clear. A referendum, if it passes, triggers full sovereignty. Denmark has committed to respecting this outcome. But economic independence is harder. Mining projects take years to develop. They require enormous capital investment, billions of dollars that Greenland doesn't have. They require infrastructure, ports, roads, processing facilities, power generation. They also require making difficult environmental decisions. Greenland's natural beauty is pristine precisely because it's been underdeveloped. Large-scale mining changes that permanently. Older Greenlanders, who lived through harsher colonial policies, children forcibly sent to Denmark for education, traditional practices suppressed, tend to favor independence strongly. The principle matters more than the economics. Younger Greenlanders, according to surveys, are more pragmatic. They want independence, but they also want jobs, opportunities, modern infrastructure. They're less willing to accept decreased living standards for abstract sovereignty. This isn't apathy. It's a different conception of what independence should provide. There's another perspective, sometimes overlooked in strategic analyses. Many Greenlanders see themselves as guardians of the Arctic environment. Their traditional knowledge, passed down through generations, includes sophisticated understanding of ice, weather, and ecosystem balance. Some argue that Greenland should resist becoming a massive extraction zone. That their sovereignty should include the right to say a no to development, to preserve their land rather than monetize it. This view has support, particularly in smaller communities where traditional hunting and fishing remain central to life. What seems to be emerging is a characteristically Greenlandic approach, selective development with strong environmental oversight and local control. Small-scale mining projects that employ Greenlanders, with profit staying in Greenland. Tourism that respects cultural sites. Fishing managed sustainably. Not a rejection of modernity, but an insistence that modernity adapt to Greenland, rather than Greenland adapting to external expectations. For now, Greenland walks a careful line. Accepting American investment in airports and communications infrastructure. Listening to Chinese proposals without committing. Maintaining the Danish relationship while asserting greater autonomy. Participating in Arctic Council discussions as a distinct voice. It's a delicate balance, taking what's useful from great power interest without becoming dependent on any single patron. Whether this balance can hold as competition intensifies remains an open question. Predicting the future is a fool's errand. But we can examine the forces in motion and consider where they might lead. Scenario 1. Continued status quo. Greenland remains connected to Denmark, receiving the annual subsidy, gradually developing mining projects with international partners, slowly building toward eventual independence on a timeline measured in decades, not years. This seems stable, but it requires Denmark's continued willingness to subsidize, and Greenland's continued patience with partial autonomy. Both could change. Scenario 2. Accelerated independence. A major mining project succeeds, say, the Kvanefield rare earth mine, generating substantial revenue. Greenland's government gains confidence in economic viability and calls an independence referendum. It passes. Greenland becomes the world's least populous sovereign nation. Then the real challenges begin, establishing currency, negotiating defense arrangements, managing diplomatic relations with powers that want influence or access. Independence proves more complex than anticipated. Scenario 3. Great power integration. Greenland, seeking economic development and security guarantees, aligns closely with one major power, most likely the US, given historical ties. This brings investment, jobs, infrastructure. It also brings loss of autonomy in practice, if not in name. American bases expand. Strategic decisions get made in Washington. Greenlanders gain material benefits but wonder if they've traded one form of dependency for another. Scenario 4. Arctic conflict zone. This is the scenario no one wants but some consider possible. As Arctic competition intensifies over shipping routes, fishing rights, mineral claims, and military positioning, Greenland becomes a flashpoint. Not through Greenlandic choice, but through its geography. Naval incidents. Airspace violations. Diplomatic crises that escalate unexpectedly. Greenland finds itself at the center of great power competition it never sought. Underlying all these scenarios is the ice itself. Melting faster than most models predicted. If current trends continue, Greenland's ice sheet could reach a tipping point within this century, a point beyond which melting becomes irreversible, eventually raising sea levels by 7 meters. This is not hyperbole. This is the assessment of glaciologists studying ice core data and satellite measurements. The minerals beneath Greenland's ice become accessible precisely because the ice is disappearing. The strategic value and the environmental catastrophe are two sides of the same process. Perhaps the most important variable is the one least discussed in geopolitical analyses: what do Greenlanders actually want for their future? The answer isn't uniform. It's debated in parliament, in town halls, in homes across the island. But certain themes recur. Control over their own destiny. Respect for their culture and language. Economic opportunities that don't destroy the environment or displace communities. Recognition as a distinct people, not an administrative region or strategic asset. These are reasonable aspirations. Whether the international system will allow Greenland to pursue them peacefully remains uncertain. Greenland didn't ask to become strategically important. Its people didn't request that melting ice reveal valuable minerals. They simply want what most peoples want: to live on their land, preserve their culture, and determine their own future. The great powers circling Greenland see resources, strategic advantages, spheres of influence. They see what Greenland can provide them. But Greenland is not a resource. It's a homeland. The Inuit who survived when the Norse vanished did so through deep knowledge of their environment, through adaptation, through respecting the ice rather than trying to conquer it. That wisdom seems relevant now, not just for Greenland, but for all of us watching ice sheets collapse and climate patterns shift. Perhaps the lesson here isn't about who will control Greenland's minerals or shipping routes. It's about whether we can learn to see the Arctic as Greenlanders do. Not as empty space to be exploited, but as a living system we're part of, whether we acknowledge it or not. The ice remembers. It holds the climate record of hundreds of thousands of years in compressed layers. It reveals what we've forgotten and warns what we're becoming. And beneath that ice, frozen and waiting, lies not just minerals and strategic advantage. It holds the question of what kind of world we'll choose to build. If this exploration resonated with you, if you value documentaries that take time to understand complex questions without easy answers, I hope you'll subscribe. These stories matter. Not because they're shocking or dramatic, but because they help us understand the quiet forces reshaping our world. Greenland's story is still being written. Not in Washington or Beijing or Copenhagen, but in Nuuk, in small fishing villages, in parliament debates conducted in Kalallasut. We'd do well to pay attention. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next exploration.